Hey there, everybody. Welcome to our reaction and review for The Bear, Season 1, Episode 6. Ceres is the title here. This is my favorite Richie episode of the show. I will say that Richie may be my favorite character on The Bear. I'm not saying I would want to hang out with him. Like, he seems like incredibly intense and messed up, and he's always either just like yelling at someone or completely lost within himself or telling the same story over and over again because this is apparently the only highlight of his life. But
Such a good Richie episode. I mean, they really sort of dove into him, just how he's really dealing with this, all the change that's happening, that it's really affecting him, not just changing the shop, changing his life, changing the neighborhood, that things don't stay the same. And he's really unable to adapt.
he's struggling to move forward. He's struggling to find a way to connect with other people. Like, that scene in the start of this when he's on this date and
Yeah.
he's telling this Bill Murray story, which I'm sure is inspired by I'm sure a lot of people out there know this, but there's like dedicated social media threads and Reddits to like random Bill Murray sightings and weird things Bill Murray does. I kind of wonder if Bill Murray sometimes is just like, I'm gonna do something weird today. What am I gonna just because it's a way to get it's a way to get headlines and it's a way to kind of live up to this persona. But anyway, for somebody like Richie, this is a really special thing. But just watching that date was so uncomfortable because it was so clear this woman did not care at all about this story, and I was just sitting here. Is this the only way you think you can connect to anybody, Richie? Because if so, man, I just feel a lot for you.
Yeah, I think it was just a really big reminder of how much things are changing and how people are changing, and he can't move forward, he can't adapt, he can't change. And yeah, I mean, telling this story is it's fine, and it means something to him, but I see why the thing she took out of it was just kind of like, oh, you were out partying at 6:30 in the morning, cool, okay, then I know that you're not the person for me.
Well, we will get more into Richie, everything else in this episode, what's going on right outside of the original beef.
And
But
seeing Michael for the first time.
yeah, that's exciting, and it's going to be a great jumping off point to the rest of this episode. So be sure to join our Patreon. We have a link in the description below. Every Tuesday night, we are over there talking all about the bear with you guys.
Mhm.
Also here at the channel, we are currently watching and discussing Shrinking
Yep.
season 1, another phenomenal show.
Yep.
In addition to the morning show, which is
Yep.
coming up very, very soon with season 3. We're working our way through that as well.
Yep.
And also Hijack.
Your favorite hijack.
I love Hijack so
No,
much.
it's really good.
Okay, Michael, we start this episode with this look into Michael and Carmy and Richie, and it's really the first time this season we've kind of gotten to see like the real dynamic that's at play here. And the kind of, I don't want to say they're all like super happy and pleasant in this moment, but it's sort of like this is their normal. Like this is something they get together
Yeah.
and do.
Yeah, that they get together, they all talk, Sugar's there too, and they're cooking. And it
Yeah.
feels very much like the kitchen is the place for them, that when they were all together, that was it. They were there, they were making food, they were telling stories, laughing. Yeah, of course everything wasn't perfect. We know, what happened to Michael, and a little bit of how he got there, of what was going on with his money troubles and his addiction problems and everything that was going on. But there were these moments that they were all together, and it always seemed to happen in the kitchen. I mean, seeing Michael cooking and stuff like that and being like, yeah, a little more of this. No, in the middle of his story, he's there.
It's really telling now with Michael gone how much the dynamic shifts because it's sort of like Michael was a glue, he's a missing piece.
Yeah.
Now everybody kind of has to adjust their roles. And so Carmy has to figure out, okay, how do I relate to, Richie without Michael here, especially given that now, this isn't just a family gathering. This is, a place of business. This is a place where we have certain goals that we have to meet, things we have to achieve. And in this episode in particular, how do we find a way to make everything seem normal and have customers coming in when there is this chaotic scene going on right outside the restaurant?
Well, that's the thing about Richie too that we saw a little bit of this in the car a couple episodes ago with Richie and Sydney, where there you see this little bit of sort of a softer side of him of he doesn't always need to be loud and yelling at everybody. And when he does kind of pull out this softer side, he's able to really kind of negotiate with people and really talk to people. His communication isn't bad when he's calmed down because, yeah, there's a bunch of chaos going out there. He's able to come out into the neighborhood and be like, hey guys, you can't hang out here. Like, I've
Yeah.
asked you guys not to. Okay, no problem. Okay, well, if you need to be here, just, get it together for a short amount of time, and then move it along. Like, I got a business. I know you guys want to be outside. Can we make it work? Yeah, we can make it work. And seeing that and him seeing that the bar next door is closed out where he's like, yeah, I didn't like the guy, but it was a staple in the neighborhood, and seeing it gone, it really hurts my heart. Like things are just really changing.
He's such an interesting guy because when he gets angry, he's basically a character in a Nick Cage movie where, Nicolas Cage is always just either like, something's wrong with the Constitution, or like he's just so over the top when he's upset, but he has this huge heart that's somewhere within him, and I really want him to get everything together, and I just think in between this bar closing, the fact that like what he's trying to say to these people on the street clearly is not working out in the way in which he
It
wants
used to.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just nothing is staying the same for him anymore. Now he's got Carmy in here bossing him around, changing up the menu, telling everyone to do different jobs. He can't function in the workplace, and this was sort of his escape.
Yeah, and for him as well, I mean, changing up the shop, I mean, after seeing the dynamic with him with Michael in the home kitchen, I'm guessing that that same dynamic was in the shop.
Yeah.
And now that everyone is changing in the shop, I mean, we see Marcus is even sleeping in the shop just
Yeah.
to make sure that everything is going to work out with this donut. Like everybody's really focused on their craft, on their cooking now. He's even lost Tina now where she's just like, listen, like I loved Michael, but like the shop is working now and it wasn't working before. And I feel better about my work. Everybody's feeling better about it. Like adapt or sink, like join us, please, or go home. Like you can't act like this anymore. We all want to do better.
I loved that scene with Tina.
Yeah, me too.
It's just like she's really coming around now, so she's fully sort of team Carmy and these methods because she was very resistant to him, to Sydney early on in the show, but I think she's really seeing that a lot of this is working and it's making her feel more fulfilled and have a greater sense of purpose even after all these years.
Yeah, and I think that it makes Richie feel even more alone because Tina was really like the last stand with
Yeah.
him.
I think he's also just like, well, what makes Carmy so special? Like, you're willing to do all of this for him. Marcus, you were literally sleeping at this place. Like, you were so desperate to make all of this work. And we know that Marcus has a lot of insecurity and fear, and he doesn't want to go back to where he once was. But I think once again, it is like, you're willing to do this for Carmy, but you weren't willing to do this before. Like, what makes him so different? And it's so interesting and bizarre that Richie can't accept the fact that Carmy worked really hard to get the level of acclaim that he did. He trained, he was at a well-established restaurant. It's okay to admit that someone is really good at this job and it's not you. Like, I know it's hard, but I believe Richie is good at a lot of other things.
Yeah, and I think things are getting even harder for Richie because once we see that the shop gets shot at and things get really, really chaotic and
Yeah.
things are even more chaotic outside, we saw him earlier go talk to those guys, be like, hey, can you move it down the street? Whatever. Yeah, no problem. We got you, Richie. Now they're not only are they back, but they're fighting outside the shop as well. He's just like, it's such chaos. He's just like, oh, the only way to beat chaos is with more chaos. Where's my gun? But then he comes outside ready to cause more chaos, and he sees Sydney out there handing out sandwiches, being like, hey, what's your name? What's your name? Okay, listen, I'm going to give you guys some sandwiches, and I need you guys to move along. Okay, we'll take these sandwiches and move along. And it's just, Richie, I think at that point, feels even more like, wow, like I am so not needed, that by the time we get to the end of the episode, we don't see him calling the cops on them. But I think it's implied enough that even though he said at the beginning when he was like, hey, I'm not going to call the cops on you guys, just move it down the street, that now he's just like, now I'm doing this.
I think he's just tired of seeing them there at that point, because I think he wants to feel like he's doing something and making some sort of progress. And I don't think he wants to see Sydney deal with them and potentially deal with them better. Like this is a really good discussion, I think, for all the commenters with this, because I will admit there was a part of me when I saw what Sydney was doing, I was just thinking, would this work? Because I get what she's doing, and I think it's a smart way to sort of try to diffuse the situation. But there's also a fear here where if you give everybody free sandwiches, are they just going to show up every day being like, give us our sandwiches and we won't fight. Otherwise, we're going to sit out here and fight.
Yeah, which is why Richie was like, don't tell your friends. Don't come back here.
Yep.
Like, this is a one-time thing, and that's it. I think Richie, at this point, by the end of the episode, is just like, how is there any way that I can keep this shop going, that I can keep things the same? If these guys are out here coming back for sandwiches or fighting or hanging around, like the bar next door is closed, we're going to be next. Nobody's going to come to our shop if these guys are out here fighting, or our shop is getting shot up. Like, there's no way to keep this going if it doesn't get cleaned up.
It's such a interesting sort of look into a neighborhood too, where if something bad is happening at one business, even if it's just, a few feet away or even just down the block, all of a sudden that whole block becomes like a do not walk around area. Like I'm a walker. Like I walk pretty much everywhere. I'm legally blind. I can't drive. So I always, when I walk, I try to come up with, okay, what's the fastest, most efficient way for me to get somewhere? And if there's a street that I know has a bunch of people outside yelling or has a lot of businesses that are shutting down and it's just not pleasant, I won't go there anymore. Like I'll pick another route, even if it's a minute or two longer, and I'll walk in that way. And I think that's sort of the manifested fear of everything that's going on here, that people are going to change their routines. And then it becomes this question of, is the food at Original Beef good enough to justify the potential that you end up being involved in a brawl on the street?
Yeah. And I mean, let's talk about Sugar. I mean, she is in such a rough spot where it was just like, she's trying to get the taxes together. She's the co-owner of this shop. She's worried she's gonna lose her home. And that very honest talk with Carmy, be like, oh, we gonna have a fight kind of thing. That seems to be the code for we gonna have a talk. It's just so cute between them. But where she's just like, what am I supposed to do? And he's just like, well, you shouldn't have lent Michael money when you knew that he was going through this. And she was just like, what are you going to do? He's my brother, kind of thing, where Carmy eventually is like, yeah, I would have lent it to him as well.
Okay. Sugar, I know you're watching. I hope that at some point the bear gives you a storyline that is actually pleasant and actually makes me understand more. Because every time Sugar shows up, it's just like, okay, something bad is happening. Something stressful is happening. Like, this storyline.
Like Bad News Richie?
Yes.
Poor guy. Like, oh my goodness. He's just like, oh, my ex has me as Bad News Richie. And my kid is like, is your last name Bad News? And he's just like, oh my God, Tiffany, why? No, you can't do that. Well, you only call me with bad news. I was like, oh, that's so sad.
I'm going to start calling Sugar Sad Story Sugar, because every time Sugar shows up, it's just like, okay, something depressing. And it's like, this storyline is well played, but
yeah,
I don't really like watching storylines about people dealing with taxes. It just stresses me out. And I'm just like, okay, I get it. It makes sense for this world. Can we get back to something else, please? This is just not for me.
No, but I mean that whole scene with the two of them talking and going through everything
Yeah.
where she was just like, "You know what I'm really actually mad about? You never ask me how I've been feeling through any of this." Like it's as simple as just like, "Hey, how are you doing?" kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I mean, his response is very genuine and it makes a lot of sense where he's just like, I don't even know how I'm feeling. Like, I haven't even dealt with my own feelings. And it feels just not genuine then for me to be asking anybody else about their feelings. And I get where he's coming from, but yeah, sometimes you gotta kind of just fake it, put it out there to just be like, I know that
Mhm.
it's hard for me to deal with my feelings, so I don't really feel like I have the right to ask how someone else is feeling, but it's a nicety that you can do to help somebody else so that they can talk.
Yeah, you're not saying by, saying, "How are you feeling?" that you're gonna sit down and just sit there for 3 hours while they tell you everything that's going on in their
Sugar
world.
might.
She might, but other people, I don't know, but it is at least something that you're showing, "I'm putting myself out there. I'm trying to recognize that I'm not the only person who's struggling," and that is important, and I think just Carmy is just so focused on what he does best, which is compartmentalizing, being like, "I can focus on the restaurant, the food,
Yeah.
the people on staff that
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with anything else." And then whenever Sugar shows up with the sad news, it's just like, okay, I guess
Sad news
I
sugar.
gotta deal with sad news Sugar now, so I gotta go ahead and take all this on. But he doesn't want to ever think about Sugar because it's sad news. So he just wants to focus in on this. And by even asking how Sugar is, then it's like letting the floodgates open and everything else just starts to come on in.
Yeah, it's this was a really good episode. I'm glad that they actually did have a flashback to Michael. I wasn't sure if we were ever going to actually see who he is, another big guest star on the show,
Yeah.
with John Berthnall. I'm sure I'm saying his name wrong, but I loved him on The Walking Dead.
He's just he's so good at so many different things.
He really is. I mean, he's so good.
Yeah,
It was so nice to see him on the show. He's perfect in this role so far.
I'm sure we'll get another guest turn for him. Hopefully at some point moving forward. Like we haven't watched ahead.
No.
My hope entering episode 7 actually is that we did just get a Richie episode in a lot of ways. If Sugar is a main part of the cast, I kind of want there to be a Sugar episode at some point before the end of this season. Like now that we've sort of understand how she feels through her own point of view, like let's
Mhm.
get our own point of view on her, sort of separate from Carmy, and kind of fill everything else out further. I know these aren't super long seasons, so there's not a lot of time for that, but I would like to assume that by the end of the finale, maybe everybody is just like a teensy bit more healed than what where they are right now.
I'd also like to just see everyone working in the shop that's not Richie, Carmy, or Sydney. I'd like to see a little more of them. We've had a lot of Marcus, but not really everybody else. Tina's starting to come around, but I would like to have an episode that's all of them and seeing them working together a little more and all the sort of more of the changes that are happening. Because I mean, we see them every episode, but
Yeah.
we don't really get to know them that well.
And there's so much potential. Like this show is
Yes.
so organic in a lot of ways where these people all feel real. We have the big name guest stars who show up, but
Mhm.
like the main cast, a lot of these people aren't, actors we were that familiar with. Like I knew Jeremy Allen White because of Shameless, but like a lot of the other people, you can so easily get lost sort of watching them in these roles. And that's a real asset that the Bear can kind of tap into a little bit more.
Absolutely. Sometimes when you have big names, it's hard to be like, "Oh, I see Paul. I only see Harrison Ford." Like it's really really hard. I mean, we just started watching the morning show, Steve Carell in it. I'm just like, it's just Michael Scott. Like I can't stop. Like he's that forever.
No, it's really tough, but this show it feels so real. I'm really really enjoying it. We'll see where the rest of this season goes.
Yep.
But for now, join our Patreon. We've got that link in the description below. Talking the Bear
Yep.
every Tuesday night at our live stream. And thank you to everyone who has joined. We really appreciate it. We'll see you here next time.